Hey there, YouTube. I'm meteorologist Brooks Garner. I work in Florida. I know a thing or two about hurricanes. I've been through a hurricane or two over the last 20 years of my career. And I want to give you a special update on how things are looking as of November 2nd. Now, at the end of this month, November 30th, the hurricane season's over. It doesn't mean we can't get stuff happening out of season. It just becomes progressively less likely. That said, this is only the third time in recorded history since the satellite era began. About 1966 is when that was a really good record. Satellite era arguably began in 1960 with Tyros 1. But in 1966, we were able to see things out in the Atlantic that otherwise we'd rely on ship reports. And this is only the third time in recorded history we've had two hurricanes at the same time during the month of November. So that in itself is significant. Hurricane Martin, a Category 1, set to strengthen to a Cat 2 before pushing off into the North Atlantic, affecting shipping lanes. But other than that, no land until it becomes post-tropical and heads for Europe, like Ireland and the UK, bringing some wind and rain. And we've got Hurricane Lisa, which right now Hurricane Lisa is making landfall in Belize. But as far as Florida is concerned, and as far as the southeast United States, we're watching this area of disturbed weather. It's got a 20% chance to develop over the next several days, about the next week or so, into what could be a subtropical storm. We'll talk about that coming up. But here we are, Hurricane Lisa, as of the 5 o'clock advisory on this November 2nd, winds of 85 miles an hour. It is currently landfalling in Belize City. A small hurricane as far as these go. The central dense overcast extends about 140 miles, and so that means the wind field is also fairly small. So I expect the wind damage on this would be somewhat limited as far as otherwise potential, right, for hurricanes hitting Central America. Also, the storm surge will be minimal, but it will produce a lot of freshwater flooding across the Yucatan Peninsula as it moves inland, a slow march toward the west, eventually into the Bay of Campeche. Now, this region of the southwest Gulf of Mexico is notorious for berthing systems. Just the shape of the coastline, the prevailing winds, it can spin a tropical wave up in a hurricane into a hurricane inside of 12 hours sometimes, rapid intensification. But we're a little bit later in the year. There's a little bit of wind shear, so it's not expected to do much once it reemerges, but it could bring some heavy rain to places like Veracruz and maybe Tampico. So if you're watching us from Mexico, maybe up around Chetumal or down towards San Carlos, you know, there's going to be some heavy rain in your future over the next few days. This moves inland, and as it interacts with the mountains, there could be some localized flooding there, exceeding 10 inches of rain, which could result in flash floods, even some mudslides. But more on this for next week. A broad and complex area of low pressure develops over the waters northeast of the Bahamas and Turks and Caicos. Now, there's a lot that has to come together for this to happen. By the way, this is the projection from the American model, the GFS, and it pushes this low pressure system toward Florida for next week, a timeline around about Tuesday or Wednesday of next week. And there's a potential a cold front comes down, interacting with this, kind of squeezing out the moisture. But only one model, the Canadian model, spins this up into a fully tropical system. But the thinking is that this upper level low, as it travels over the warm waters, could pick up some tropical characteristics, becoming a subtropical system, maybe a subtropical storm. If that happens, the name would be Nicole. Now, worst case scenario, which is that GFS model, a lot of the other models kind of keep it just offshore, we'd have winds in Florida, at least, about 20 to 30 miles per hour in gusts, but there might be one spike in the wind where it could exceed 40 miles per hour in gusts around about Tuesday of next week. If that was to happen, there'd be a coastal erosion issue here with waves coming ashore, battering waves, relentless waves, 5 to 10 feet tall. And remember, this area already hard hit from Hurricane Ian. Folks here in Volusia County, Florida, still recovering from storm surge and up to 20 inches of rain. And so the idea of more rain and an already saturated ground is not a good thing. Now, keep in mind, this is an extremely long-range forecast, but there could be areas in Florida or wherever this future system works toward. Could be coastal Georgia, could be the Carolinas, just too soon to say, but in excess of 3 to 5 inches of rain, which in itself doesn't sound like much, especially for this region, which during the summertime we can get that in a routine thunderstorm. But Florida had a pretty excessive rainy season. We picked up over a foot of rain during the middle of September, and then with Ian coming through at the end of September, anywhere from 15 to 20 inches fell. So if you put a shovel in the ground here across Central Florida, you hit water within 3 or 4 inches in many neighborhoods. So the ground is extremely saturated. Any additional rain like that wouldn't soak in, it would run off and cause some localized flooding. Not to mention the storm surge, which pretty much stops the flow of some of the rivers dumping out into the Atlantic. So in the weather headlines with this system, we've got weak low pressure forming this weekend. it could become a subtropical system. The impacts, wherever it goes, whether it's Florida, which is currently the most likely situation or scenario, or potentially coastal Georgia or the Carolinas, we'd see a subtropical storm, potentially named Nicole, with steady midweek rain, beach erosion, wind gusts 20, 30 miles an hour, maybe even a gale center out over the open waters of the Atlantic. By the way, if you're going to the beaches across central Florida, maybe you're down here on vacation, maybe you live along the beach, heads up. Waves of 4 feet tomorrow means rip currents are a possibility. This is loosely related to the larger flow, but if that system forms, or should I say when it forms, we could be seeing significantly higher waves and more dangerous rip currents. All right, so we've got Lisa and Martin. Next up is Nicole. This has become quite the busy hurricane season. Pretty ironic as well, considering the month of August saw 0 named tropical systems. First time in many, many years. It's only happened several times in hurricane history as far as what's been recorded. So it's been a very active year. Nicole is the next on the list. So where is this thing? Well, right, look at this. There's not much going on. We've got Hurricane Lisa making landfall here in Belize. We've got Hurricane Martin. It's got a nice little eye here as it works up toward the North Atlantic. The thinking, though, is that with an upper level system coming out of Florida right now, producing some thunderstorms currently as I record this broadcast on YouTube, it's producing some storms across Florida. That's going to head east and help to develop low pressure over the open waters. Now, the water temperatures are plenty warm for a tropical system to develop, but they are cooling down as the season kind of winds down. What once were water temperatures in the upper 80s, around the loop current here, coming out of between Cuba and Yucatan Peninsula into the Gulf of Mexico. Now it's in the lower 80s. And water temperatures are in the lower 80s here over that region. We got to watch with that possible subtropical system developing. Now, you only need about 80 to 82 degrees for something to form and then maintain its strength. So it's warm enough, but it's we're getting toward that marginal season. And now, as far as tropical potential goes, green means good. That means no tropical potential thanks to too much wind shear, thanks to dry air, thanks to a lot of complexities in the atmosphere. Red means bad. That means that stuff could form. So in the near term, we're looking at really Western Caribbean. That's where Hurricane Lisa is making its landfall right now. But in the extended forecast taking us through the weekend, there's going to be a little area where a little tropical development could occur where the wind shear will lessen and conditions would become favorable. But I mean, look at all the green. It's got a lot to fight if it's going to form. So the chance of any kind of rapid development is pretty low. Now, this is our Fox model. You can only get this with Fox television stations. This is a proprietary model, and it models the wind as well as future clouds and future radar. But in this case, we've got the wind layer on. And by Sunday, we're going to have some pockets of some gustier weather as that low tries to develop, but it may be a little bit slow on the draw. Now, another limiting factor with this system will be the wind shear. Red means high wind shear. And if you picture a tropical system like a cake, it could get tipped over pretty quickly with wind shear like this, in northwest wind shear, all this red Thursday, Friday, Saturday, Sunday. So, I mean, it is a hostile environment for anything to try and develop. So we're not excited about this in the sense of being weary that we're going to have a real big deal. However, a big old ocean low could mimic a nor'easter where wherever this thing goes, you have a sustained rain that could eclipse 3 to 4 inches and sustained winds as well. So we're going to watch this carefully. I mentioned there's one model, the Canadian model, which isn't great with tropical meteorology, but it can give you a little insight to some of the trends. Does try and spin something up as a tropical system, maybe a tropical storm, but it doesn't get strong enough to become a hurricane. That said, we're going to watch it really carefully. Stay with us right here on this YouTube channel. Follow us, ring the bell, Fox 35 Orlando. We bring a host of experts. Our meteorologists have a collective almost century of experience, if you add them all together. And we work very carefully, very closely with the National Hurricane Center. And being in Florida, this is what we do. It's like being a snow forecaster up in New England or Detroit or the Rocky Mountains. So this is our jam. Stick with us for the inside scoop on tropical meteorology, and we'll keep you ahead of the next storm. I'm Storm Team Meteorologist Brooks Garner. Thanks for watching.